instead of being a fan of like WWE, the main roster, maybe you can just parlay your fandom into being a full-time fan of NXT. And I kind of add that because NXT, as we've seen of late, has kind of done the nostalgia act of reusing all our favorite brands: No Mercy, Great American Bash, Halloween Havoc. So essentially, we can watch NXT and it can just feel, maybe we can just pretend that we're watching like 2000 WWE because, hey, we're watching NXT, No Mercy, or Great American Bash, or Halloween Havoc, or Judgment Day, or I know they've used some other ones along the way. But one they were about to use, logo and all, from 2001, was Invasion for next Tuesday's show. They are no longer using Invasion. I actually like it because they took the logo off and they took the name off after only announcing they were going to have it for like a week because of some backlash due to the political climate, when it comes to overseas conflicts and stuff going on. But Santino Marella,
here's the other thing too, not to cut you off.
Mm-hmm.
Those attacks happened 2 years ago on that date, so it's probably not a good idea. Let's just be honest.
So all of that kind of came forward and they got some backlash. So Invasion turned to Showdown, and they expressed it on NXT this week, and in a way of just not changing the name, but explaining why. Because TNA says, they're not invading because they feel like they're on equal ground. So they actually said, we should take that name Invasion off because we're not invading. We're here. We're on equal ground. This is more of a showdown. And it's kind of funny because we're only a week away from talking about this. And wow, we were wrong very quickly because we said that this was going to be a storyline that kept us all the way to Survivor Series, and it's paying off in like 5 days.
Yeah, and the other thing that you mentioned earlier about like the card itself, why is Trick Williams the captain? You mentioned that earlier, right? Trick Williams is the captain.
I mentioned it off air. Yes, we mentioned it off air. Trick Williams is the captain of one team.
But why?
He said he was the captain. Ricky Saints this past week told him he's the NXT champion, so he should shut up and that he's the captain.
That's what I was getting at. Why the NXT champion should be the NXT team captain, not the TNA champion.
Kind of like a co-captain. But yeah, Ricky Saints stepped up and said that he's the captain of this squad. And he essentially is the one that picked the main players, if you will, for this. So we're getting Survivor Series in October because these are going to be Survivor Series matches. And Mike Santana and Trick Williams will be facing off for the TNA Championship at Bound for Glory. But this event, I think, is shaping up to be a good one. I am excited for it. It's going up against AEW, which is going to have a Title Tuesday Dynamite. I don't know if that's because of MLB playoffs or might be NHL opening night, because I know all that
probably one of those. You're probably on it.
Those two things are coming up. I do know that. And unfortunately, I can tell you that I probably won't be watching NXT live because my team will be in the playoffs on Tuesday night in an important game because, well, they'll be playing. I know that for sure. But I will be catching this event. And I will say...
by the way, real quick, I think we know what team's going to be facing your team. Those Boston Red Sox, baby.
We will see. I'm rooting for the Boston Red Sox because one thing that I have in common every single year is I always have a team in the MLB playoffs. This year it is the Toronto Blue Jays, but every other year it is who's ever playing the Yankees. So,
there it is. That's my guy. We agree on that. But if we do end up playing each other next week, yeah, we'll save it for that.
Yes. So,
but anyways,
so next Tuesday, AEW Dynamite is going against NXT. And listen, a lot of times, I think this whole rivalry, this is where I guess we'll start. There is this rivalry that's always talked about how like NXT tries to up their game for like a special edition show when AEW moves like to Tuesdays for whatever. And they have this whole thing where I think before like NXT had like their ECW arena show / PLE feeling where they had the Undertaker and all this other stuff show up on it when AEW was going up against them. And when it comes to this particular week, I don't really look at it like that necessarily. I think NXT versus TNA is the better show. It feels like a PLE. I'm going to watch it over whatever AEW is doing. That's not really a slight, like a jab at AEW. I think this is a storyline that's going good. I don't see them pulling out like Undertaker appearance or a Cody Rhodes appearance, for no reason like they have in the past. I think this just happens to be NXT just is going to be putting out a big show that night because I think with Bound for Glory that upcoming weekend, maybe they wanted to kind of do it as a go home for that. And like I said, this isn't really like, what are you going to watch, AEW versus NXT? I think this one's a clear one. I think NXT versus TNA. I know it's titled Tuesday for AEW, but I know just like NXT, AEW also does these special edition shows all the time, right? Fight for the Fallen,
Yeah,
Winter is Coming.
they do it so much that it doesn't feel special. You know what
I
I
mean,
mean?
NXT does it a lot too, but I will give them credit that this one isn't just like a special. Like this one feels a little bit different. It has like a meaning. It's not just like a, hey, we're putting all the titles on the line kind of show.
It's a two different wrestling promotion event. It's a dual promotion.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's this. I think that's the problem with AEW. That's what makes it hard for a lot of people like myself to stay up with it. Is the stories are just not there. Like I don't get invested because it's like, to me, it's like you just throw matches together. Like, oh yeah, these guys are really like fantasy booking. Like, oh yeah, I want to see these two wrestle. But why can't I get a story first? And I know you just mentioned TNA, NXT. Like it's been kind of a quick build here with this, but in another sense, it really
been going
hasn't,
for a
because,
little bit.
yeah, the promotion of it, like they've been having this working relationship for a while, and this is kind of almost in a way, almost. I don't want to say necessarily payoff, but maybe in that direction, I guess, of potentially being a payoff. I don't think this is the end. I think this is just the beginning of more things like this between the two promotions.
And we were kind of talking off air because you were mentioning while we're not recording was about like, well, what is the payoff in the sense of the winning team? And I think the payoff is respect. Because, and I don't mean respect from a kayfabe standpoint. I mean respect from a shoot standpoint in the sense of this is going to be Tuesday night, WWE's time slot, the CW. This isn't the TNA Impact show. This is the NXT show. So essentially, I feel like WWE/NXT is running the show here. Obviously, Trick Williams is the TNA champion, right? So I'm kind of, wondering exactly how much respect WWE is going to give TNA. How much are they going to let their guys lose or look weak against the TNA guys? We'll start with like the women's 4-on-4 match because you have Kaylani Jordan right now, right? She is somebody who is the leader of Team TNA as the TNA champion, but she is a part of NXT. And I do actually like, she put out on Twitter, she put out the shot, like just a picture of Stone Cold Steve Austin when he was the WWF champion wearing the WCW shirt as the leader of Team WCW during that invasion angle. And she kind of essentially maybe like put herself in those shoes of like, I'm an NXT star, but I'm Team TNA. And I kind of like that story kind of going in here. So it is, you got that kind of bleed over of like Kaylani Jordan is the TNA champion. So she's going to unlike what Trick Williams is doing, right? He's NXT and TNA champion. Yeah. Kaylani Jordan's like, I'm TNA champion. Maybe I see myself as representing TNA and going against NXT. And I kind of like that little change here in the story.
Who do you lean towards in that matchup between NXT versus TNA?
In the women's match, I will say Kaylani Jordan did one thing, which appears that she might have said this past week on NXT that the Iconics, or the Inspiration as they are in TNA, are the tag team champions. So she might have gave away a future TV taping, which is a little bit different in the TNA world because they do their TV tapings a little bit different than NXT. They're not live every single Tuesday. Yeah. So we'll see if she gave that result away as a spoiler, as they're going to be future champions. But I do gotta give it to Team NXT because I do think that they've got the better star power. Now, again, it's such a weird dynamic because we talk about respect, and I think that's the main, catalyst in this thing because TNA, NXT, it's a WWE product, but overall, TNA isn't the developmental brand, and TNA is full of stars. Moose, Frankie Kazarian, right? The Hardy Boys, Mustafa Ali. These are people who are not in developmental going up against WWE's developmental. And I say that because the part of Team TNA is the Iconics, the Inspiration, a team that has been at WrestleMania, right? So it's, you wonder, when I say like stars, it's hard to discount them because they've been on the main roster when no one else has.
But I'm gonna counterpoint that. I mean, Team TNA, as you know, as a whole, if you average their age out, they are the more veteran wrestlers. I mean, the
Well, yeah,
inspiration
everybody, I
iconics,
think, in Team TNA is going to be the more veteran wrestlers, right? Frankie Kazarian is going
pretty
to
much.
be, Trick
But at
Williams all
this
day when it
point,
comes to age.
I'm going to go age and experience over the youth of NXT. I really think in this matchup, I think TNA is going to take it. I really do. I mean, people forget Mara Sada. Was it Mara Sadie? Is that how she pronounced it?
I think it's
I
Sadie.
know.
I'm
I
going to
always know
say
her as Jakara Jackson from when she was in NXT. I mean, she's part of that as well. So she's been part of the WWE family. So all three of these women on TNA have had some time in WWE, whether it's on the main roster or NXT. The NXT women, how much exposure have they all had on the main roster? Is my point. So I'm going to go because of I think the talent and experience, I think, overrides this. I think TNA wins.
so. It's not really Team NXT versus Team TNA. I mean, it's like back in the day when like SmackDown took on Raw, right? They're all part of WWE, right? And it's kind of the same here because Team TNA could be Team WWE. It could be WWE versus NXT because, like you said, it's not just people who are in TNA, but it's also people who've been in WWE and have already kind of been better in WWE, have gone higher, in the future. So it's like Team NXT versus Team NXT 2.0. It's like the NXT veterans versus
Black
the
and
NXT
gold.
rookies.
It's almost like black. Part of it's black and gold NXT.
Yeah. I mean, especially too with like the Iconics in there as well.
Exactly.
And it's going to be interesting because these are Survivor Series matches. So that means you got to eliminate everyone involved. But
Yeah.
how about this one? You talk about old versus new. A
Huh.
few days before the Hardy Boys take on the Dudley Boys in a table match for their swan song in what is one of the greatest rivalries in pro wrestling tag team history, they're going to put their world tag team titles on the line against NXT tag team champions in a winner take all match as the Dark State versus the Hardys. What do you see happening here? Everyone banned from ringside, by the way, as well. What do you see happening here a few days before their big clash versus Dudley Boys at Bound for Glory?
It's tough. It really is because do you want them coming off licking their wounds after a loss to the Dudleys? I certainly would say no. And Dark State, on the other hand, they are a hot property in NXT. So taking a loss here is not good for them either. It's that situation where it's like whoever loses this match is going to lose a little bit of steam going into future bouts. If I have to lean, I guess this is going to be a common theme for me. I'm going to go with the Hardys. I think they got to go in on guns ablazing when they face off the Dudleys at Bound for Glory.
Yeah, I mean, the Hardy Boys are the most decorated, or one of at least. I think the Dudleys will argue that, and that's why they're fighting at Bound for Glory again. But some of the most decorated tag teams in pro wrestling history. Like again, there you go. The Hardy Boys are, as we saw at WrestleMania 10 years ago, if they popped up on WrestleMania, in a card full of Rocks and Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin's, they're going to get a pop that equals all of them. They are a big deal. They're somebody who makes me want to watch this show for sure. And, this is a big match heading into Bound for Glory because are they going to go in as champions? Is it going to be just grudge match versus the Dudley Boys? Or are they going to go in as double champions, beating the Dark State? So it should be interesting. As one match I'm really looking forward to, and it's kind of reversed, right? Because Ethan Page spent so many years in TNA, so many years, developing himself, in Impact Wrestling and such like that, taking on Mustafa Ali, who spent so many years in WWE. We argue that very well he could have been in Kofi Kingston's spot against Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, about 8 years ago. If he didn't get injured before the Elimination Chamber, and then Kofi Kingston took his spot. So we'll never know. But this is a match I'm looking forward to. Mustafa Ali. We just saw him. Not at the most recent TNA event, but the one we went to, Slammiversary over the summer, where he put on an amazing show, as Mustafa Ali can. And he's taking on Ethan Page, who is the NXT North American champion.
Who also puts on a good show.
Who also puts on a great show. Like I said, it's a guy who cut his teeth in TNA so that when he came over to NXT, and he came over actually at the start of this story. Let's not forget that, right? We talk about this story being rushed. It's not really rushed because Ethan Page was one of the first kind of crossovers when this story got started a long time ago, right? He came over as a member of TNA and kind of blossomed into a NXT superstar when he got gold around his waist. And he currently has gold around his waist. And he's taking on Mustafa Ali. I'm really looking forward to this match. Now, you picked two TNA guys so far. What are you saying happens in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ethan Page is going to still win. I think he wins this. I think he retains the championship. It'll be a great match between two wrestling veterans. I know Ethan Page is he's literally the same age as me. He's actually a day older than me if you look it up online. So he just turned 36, and Mustafa Ali is like 39, so he's pushing almost 40. So these guys have been doing it for a long time. They've been at the highest level. You know, Ethan Page hasn't been on the main roster in WWE yet, but he's been in AEW. He's done some great things and everywhere else, and he's making his name in NXT right now. So this is two accomplished wrestlers that are going to put on a really good show. Arguably could be the match of the night. Honestly, that's a certain possibility, but I still think Ethan Page walks away as the champ still.
You know, I have to agree with you on that. I do think, obviously, if you're taking Team TNA, you know, you got to kind of split it. It's 4 matches right now, so there's really, you know, it could end up just being a complete split, right? Yeah. 2 and 2. Yeah. But so far, 2 for TNA, 1 for NXT, and that gets us to the main event. And we're talking about, will it be a split or will it be a win for TNA? And that's the match between Team NXT, Team TNA from the men's side. And, you know, as we kind of alluded to at the beginning of this, and as we've kind of been talking about experience, right? I will say Team NXT has some of that non-developmental experience in Ricky Saints, right? Who came over from AEW. He's the new NXT champion. He teams up with TNA champion Trick Williams to take on Javon Evans and Miles Bourne versus Mike Santana, who we saw is, you know, many thought he was going to leave Slammiversary in July, you know, in his home area of New York City with the belt.
We know they booed that one, remember?
Yes. Frankie Kazarian, who spent a lot of time in every company, essentially put TNA on the map many years ago in the AJ Styles and Samoa Joe days, and then obviously had some time in AEW himself.
Is Frankie the oldest wrestler on this card, or is Matt Hardy older than him? Because Frankie's got to be almost 50 now.
Well, Frankie Kazarian is 48 years old. Matt Hardy is 51 years old. Jeff Hardy is 48 years old. So Frankie Kazarian and Jeff Hardy are both 48. Matt Hardy is 51. But
that's crazy. That's crazy to think that Matt Hardy's in his 50s, man. I just can't get over that right now after you said that.
Yeah, and you got to love wrestling too because of the fact that, you know, you think about it, he's 51 years old and he's, you know, obviously his friends and family and know him very well and know all about what he's doing, and there's no slouch. But to kind of, you know, if for some reason there's a family member who kind of fell off and they're like, hey, you're 51 years old, you're in wrestling, like WWE wrestling, because I watched WrestleMania, I didn't see you there. And you're like, no, I'm on the CW on the NXT show, and I'm on TNA on Access TV. You know, to be at part of like those kind of programs that are more of like overall things that you would say as developed, because even TNA, right, has that feeling for like the AJ Smiles and the Samoa Joes back in the day of developmental, right? Mm-hmm. To have that where Matt Hardy's been to the top of the mountain, but yet he still puts the same effort into CW Tuesday nights as he does WrestleMania, really shows his love.
Yeah, like you said, I'll add to that. It really shows the professionalism of Matt Hardy, and just the guy's been doing it for, let's go back. Like when we watched them first, both Matt and Jeff in the 90s, who thought we would be sitting here saying, hey, they're wrestling in 2025 and still putting on a decent show?
Oh, yeah. Crazy. I mean, absolutely not, right? When you're watching them in the night, especially with the kind of show they put on, you would have thought they would have broken their backs to not be able to do that a long, long time ago. Because obviously they did some of the more death-defying stunts than anybody else.
But to get back to the nitty-gritty here, I am going to go with NXT here. So I guess I'm going to give the cop-out answer. I think it's going to be 2-2. I do think this is going to be a really good match. I do think Ricky Saints is going to be the one that's going to take NXT to victory by the end of the night.
I mean, either way, I think Team TNA, right? You got Leon Slater, who has been coming into his own late in TNA. He's been kind of coming on the scene. I wasn't very familiar with him at the start of the year. He put on that match at Slammiversary against Moose, which might have been the match of the night. You also have Moose, obviously, on this card. He is somebody who didn't come up in the TNA days of Frankie Kazarian. He's more of the face of TNA over the last 10 years or so, with the Josh Alexanders.
Everybody knows my love for Moose. He's got his connections here to Syracuse. We, obviously we love Moose. But I can't pick Moose's team in this situation. I do think Trick Willie, Javon Evans is going to put on a great show. And watch out for Miles Bourne. I've mentioned it before. I see a lot of I know he kind of has the look and everything and the way he carries himself, but he kind of reminds me of Randy Orton. So we'll see how he does.
Let me ask you as we finish up the NXT talk, because there's somebody who is missing from this card, somebody who's missing from this company right now, essentially because he recently relinquished the championship in a loss, obviously, to Ricky Saints, and that's Oba Femi. Is Oba Femi heading to the main roster and leaving NXT?
I hope he is. He's ready. He's ready to make a splash. Whatever brand gets him, Raw or SmackDown, is going to get a stud. And I can't wait to watch WWE hopefully not drop the ball with this guy and make him the star that he is, because he is a mega star in the making, a WrestleMania main eventer going into the future. He's a hell of a talent.
And, you talk about, we started this whole podcast talking about, I think we talked about every day for the last 2 months, is WrestleMania prices, right? And we talked also about John Cena's final match and those ticket prices, but more probably relevant is John Cena, essentially his final match, regardless ticket prices, is his final match, right? And with WrestleMania next year, not having John Cena involved, probably not having The Rock involved, they're probably saving him for Saudi Arabia and the bigger payday, right? Makes us think, well, we got to make sure. I'm not saying WWE doesn't have stars, but AJ Styles has obviously announced he's on his way out. That's why we're having the big John Cena AJ Styles match at Crown Jewel, and we'll talk about that next week. But Oba Femi, now would be a good time to bring him up. So we don't want to bring him up like at the Royal Rumble and do that kind of quick, short build to him versus somebody kind of thing. You want to have him at WrestleMania against a formidable foe where like he's an equal, right? It's not just like an Omos that just made his debut, kind of a Umaga, quick kind of descent. We want to have him not just as a special attraction, but maybe as somebody who has an actual storyline behind him, a formidable foe. Maybe he's avenging a loss, what have you.
Pair him up with Rusev. That'd be fun.
Having him involved in WrestleMania, I think next year is a big deal because, again, we got John Cena on his way out the door. Not saying Oba Femi's replacing John Cena, but essentially John Cena sells tickets for like 5 people, right? If you're saying that, Ricky Saints, Oba Femi, Miles Bourne are all on the card, and then you say, sorry, not any of those guys are on the card, but John Cena is instead. John Cena can do that, right? John Cena can be the face of a poster, and you can sell the tickets on just him. WrestleMania can sometimes have four pictures on the poster, and as long as they're 4 big people, you can sell it on them, right? So John Cena, his loss essentially means to make up for that and to make up for the presence that he has. Like I said, all hands on deck for next year's WrestleMania, and now's a good time to start building up Oba Femi. We got Brock Lesnar back. You know what I mean? Braun Breaker, we all talk about how he's probably going to have a big spot next year at WrestleMania, maybe against Brock Lesnar. So get those kind of guys starting to build to big time. And like I said, get them up there before the Royal Rumble. Get Oba Femi in there before the Royal Rumble so that we can actually start him maybe have him so much as when the Royal Rumble hits, maybe you're thinking about him as a contender to win instead of just as a surprise entrance. That's what I'm just saying. But I'm looking forward to NXT versus TNA Invasion, or Showdown as it's now called. Should be a good show. And it's probably the most I've looked forward to NXT versus TNA or NXT in general in a little bit. And I'm excited for it.